in central Israel, not far from David Ben Gurion Airport, in a mixed Arab and Jewish city known as Ramla, sits the office of the chief rabbinate of the IDF. Their headquarters are located on an army base called Shura that is generally closed to outside visitors. One of the obligations of the IDF rabbinate is to take responsibility for the funerals of Israeli soldiers, as well as oversee the customs and care that come with traditional Jewish observance. They identify and purify the bodies and begin the counseling process for families of the soldiers killed during their military service. In a normal month, when Israel's not at war, they may not receive any bodies at all. Even during wartime, they might only see a small handful of bodies on any given week. But on October 7th, the Shura military base experienced a day unlike any other in the history of the state of Israel. For 2 weeks straight, trucks rolled through their gates unceasingly, filled with the bodies collected from the massacre sites on the Gaza border. Over 1,600 bodies were brought to Shura, overwhelming the dedicated staff to treating each victim with the utmost respect. This past August, I visited the Shura military base, met with some of the soldiers who were there on October 7th. The stories they told defy belief. The horrors they witnessed remain seared into their minds. One of the soldiers told me of the horrific lengths the terrorists went to make identifying the bodies more difficult. You really can't conceive of the depths of what this Shura staff went through that day without standing with them in prayer in the exact place where the atrocities happened. October 7th and its aftermath shattered the souls of everyone in Israel, especially those who were struck personally by the tragedy. While visiting the Nova festival site, I asked a survivor if he's able to sleep through the night. He tried to smile, but with a tear in his eye, he just shook his head and said he's doing the best he can. At Soroka Hospital in Beersheba, I asked two parents whose son lost both legs and an arm in Gaza how they've remained so strong. They just said that from the moment they heard the news, they made up their mind to do everything they could to help their son survive and live the best life that he could. Since that horrible day 1 year ago this week, the souls of each one of us has been shaken by what happened in Israel. The horrors of this unprovoked war were quickly followed up by a tsunami of anti-Israel sentiment that swept the world and our country. While still dealing with the shock and trauma of what happened to our brothers and sisters in Israel, here at home, our own sons and daughters were confronted with harassment, intimidation, and blatant anti-Semitism on their college campuses. They returned home asking the question, what place do we have as Jews in this country? And we looked at them in bewilderment because we were asking ourselves the same question. Was October 7th the catalyst that finally ended the golden age of Judaism in the United States? As we join together now 1 year later, we have the gift of retrospect that was not afforded to us over the course of the year. Now we can begin to make sense of how October 7th affected our American Jewish community, and we can derive lessons that will most assuredly set our course for the future. Nearly every poll monitoring anti-Semitism reported that American Jews overwhelmingly felt a marked increase of anti-Semitism in their personal lives. Over 70% of college students responded in poll after poll that they had witnessed anti-Semitism on their campus over the past year. And as a result of these experiences, Jews have been forced to realize that no matter how observant or Jewish we feel, the rest of the world sees our Judaism as our defining characteristic. No Jewish community ever experienced such a phenomenon like the Jews of Nazi Germany. So much of the German Jewish community saw themselves as German first and as Jewish a distant second. They served proudly in the German army during World War I and considered themselves among the most patriotic members of society. Yet when the Nazi stormtroopers came to round them up, they did not ask, who here is Orthodox? Who's Reform? Who's Zionist? They only asked, who is a Jew? In many ways, American Jews, like pre-war German Jews, have also distanced themselves from Jewish practice. We often refer to ourselves as cultural Jews. We replaced the Torah's call to practice mitzvot and supplanted it with a vague allegiance to tikkun olam, or social action. One of the prime challenges that confronts us when we dilute the tenets of our faith is the difficulty we have passing it on to the next generation. If all we pass on is social action, then we should not be surprised when future generations jettison their Jewish faith and surround themselves with people of all faiths who primarily revere tikkun olam. Tikkun olam is an important part of the Jewish faith, but it is in no way the sum total of our spiritual existence. In the wake of October 7th, Jews around the world found themselves forced to confront a new reality. Perhaps the starkest realization many Jews faced was the wrathful reaction we received from those we thought shared our values. We thought that our enlightened views aligned us clearly with the tikkun olam adjacent crowds of other faiths. To our shock, when October 7th happened, we witnessed some of the people many Jews felt aligned with tearing down flyers of hostages, comparing Israel to Nazis, and in some cases, demonizing Jews and all aspects of our faith. And it was in that moment when our social media feeds went from the bizarrely abstract to the exceedingly personal that we were forced to ask ourselves the question, why do I care so much? Why does it hurt me so profoundly when my faith is attacked? Why, when Judaism is only a part of who I am, does it pain my entire being when my people, my homeland, and my faith are maligned? Over this past year, we, the American Jewish community, have been confronted with a challenging paradox. If we aren't that observant in our faith, if we learn more and lean more to the universalist principles than the particular, why is it that when our faith and our people are directly attacked, the pain feels more personal than anything else we've ever experienced? In 1907, my great-grandfather, Rabbi Barras, emigrated from Romania to Palestine at the age of 7 years old. His mother died giving birth to one of his younger siblings, and after her passing, he went to live with his aunt. She was a fiercely devout Orthodox Jew and wanted my great-grandfather to have a very serious Jewish education. She brought him to Palestine and enrolled him in the yeshiva of Rabbi Abraham Isaac Kook. Rav Kook was one of the leaders of the religious Zionist movement, and he ultimately became the Ashkenazic chief rabbi of Mandatory Palestine. My family comes by Zionism, honestly. Rav Kook, however, was detested by many in the ultra-Orthodox community. Despite being ultra-Orthodox himself, Rav Kook believed that the Orthodox community needed to embrace the secular Zionists who were coming to build up the country. While the ultra-Orthodox world rejected the non-Orthodox community out of hand, Rav Kook believed that through Zionism, these secular Jews would rediscover their Judaism. In my opinion, the same dynamic is happening again today because of October 7th and its aftermath. In the mid-late to 1800s, large cadres of young, non-religious, idealistic Jews began to believe that they had no future in Europe. They were marginalized from society and detested because of their religious identity. At the same time, while they were proud to be Jewish, they felt little or no connection to religious practice or education. And by the time they arrived in Palestine, the local ultra-Orthodox community was prepared to write them off. Rav Kook, on the other hand, said, "Not so fast. If these Jews felt passionately enough to seek out a Jewish homeland, then despite their secular nature, something inside of them is yearning for greater meaning in life. Something inside of them wanted to know, why is it that being Jewish means so much to me? After all, if they didn't really care about religion, they could have simply converted to Christianity, remained in Europe as accepted members of society." In the same vein today, we American Jews have been confronted with a wave of anti-Semitism unlike anything we thought we would ever see again in this country. And so, we have turned inward to our Judaism. Across the country, my colleagues tell me that this past year was the most engaged they ever saw their congregants in their careers. Shabbat worship attendance was the highest they'd ever seen. It was here too, but that was mainly because of my idea for the bingo cards. Since October 7th, we Jews have not backed down. We've fortified. We didn't allow our disillusionment to scatter us. Instead, it brought us together. Hamas and its terrorist allies did not break our spirit, they ennobled it. And in the process, we have fulfilled the dream of Rav Kook. Through our Zionist passions, we've returned home as well to our Jewish faith. But let's be clear. This happened not because others attacked us. It happened because somewhere deep inside each one of us, whether you want to admit it or not, we know that Judaism holds for us infinite meaning. It consoles us, it guides us, it inspires us. But somehow, the Jew has developed the instinct to return home in the moments when they feel either threatened, alone, or abandoned. In 1963, the famed Jewish historian Salo Baron published a paper that argued against what was known as the lachrymose conception of Jewish history. This was the idea that the Jewish experience over the last 2,000 years could best be characterized by pain and suffering. Baron wrote that Jewish history is not to be seen simply as a series of persecutions which determine its nature and its course, but rather as a process of ongoing engagement between the Jews and their surroundings. It's not anti-Semitism that defines us. It's not the exclusion from the other nations that has facilitated our survival. Rather, it was the refusal, no matter how far we drift away, to ever cut the cord between us and the spiritual heritage our people have nourished for nearly 4 millennia. There's a well-known story of a convent that sheltered Jewish children during the Holocaust. When the war was over, a member of the Jewish agency, armed with an international mandate to find any surviving Jewish children, went to the convent and knocked on the door. When one of the nuns answered, the man requested to see the Jewish children. "There are no Jewish children here," he was told abruptly. "Please, can I come in and look around and speak with the children?" he requested from the nun. "Absolutely not," she responded. "Then can I just have 2 minutes while the children are gathered? 2 minutes, and then I will leave." The nun, in an effort to get rid of this man, finally relented. "You may come in for 2 minutes. The children are eating lunch in the dining hall. But 2 minutes, and then you must leave." The man nodded and entered the dining hall. He looked around at a large group of children who were being raised as devout Catholics. If there were Jews there, they could not have been further removed from their Jewish families and traditions. Suddenly the man shouted, "Shema Yisrael." He waited a moment and then heard in unison a handful of scattered children cry out, "Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad." The man turned to the nun and said, "These children are Jewish. They're coming with me." On October 7th, Hamas shouted in a bloodthirsty lust, "Death to Yisrael." But ever since then, all we've heard is, "Shema Yisrael." And as we joined Israelis in a deep and sorrowful mourning process, even the most disconnected Jews among us felt the spark in their souls light up. Over the past year, each one of us has been reminded that we descend from a majestic tradition that thrives when we are connected and united, walking faithfully in the footsteps of our ancestors, clinging boldly to the mitzvot and customs that bind one generation to the next, both morally and spiritually. In the book of Deuteronomy, we read 21 times how God called our ancestors to set up the holy temple in Jerusalem. The ancient sages teach the importance of a centralized location for sacrificial worship in Israel. The Torah wanted to ensure that Jews worshiped together and maintained the same customs. God was afraid that if the Jews would scatter and not gather for the purpose of communicating with the divine, then they would each head in different directions. They would change the customs. They would become disconnected. And eventually, the traditions that link Jews from one generation to the next would diminish and ultimately be lost. It is no secret that such a pattern has been developing here in America. But on October 7th, when the call Shema Yisrael rang out from the homeland of our people, each one of us remembered from where we came, and we responded, "Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad." The Lord is our God, the Lord is one. We remembered how precious the heritage is that we have inherited, and how vital it is that our generations do their part to protect it and pass it on to the next generation. But to do so, we have to come home to our tradition. We have to stop running in different directions that lead to the abandonment of our customs and the dilution of our faith. We have to show the same fortitudes as did the generations who sacrificed so much so that we might inherit the traditions of our ancient heritage. On this new year of 5785, the first Rosh HaShanah of the post-October 7th era, let us commit ourselves to recognizing that the heritage Hamas is trying to wipe out is dearer to us than we ever realized. Let us acknowledge that our children deserve every opportunity to learn what it means to respond, Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, whenever their souls are penetrated by the holy words, Shema Yisrael. For them, we are committed. But not only for them do we cry out. For the Jews of Masada, who gave up their lives rather than witness the Roman destruction of Jerusalem, we cry out, Shema Yisrael. For the Jews of the Iberian Peninsula, who risked being burnt at the stake at the hands of the Inquisition, but nevertheless taught their children how to honor Shabbat in secret, we cry out, Shema Yisrael. For the Jewish leader of the Roman ghetto, who had to get down on his knees, put his cheek to the floor so that he could kiss the bottom of the Pope's shoe in exchange for mercy on his people, and then walk back to the ghetto to share the words of Torah with his family, we cry out, Shema Yisrael. For the Jews of the shtetl, who shivered violently, holding on dearly to their prayer books while hiding in their cellars and basements as the Cossack-led pogroms came to slaughter Jews for sport, we cry out, Shema Yisrael. For the Jews who perished in the inferno of the Shoah and who feared before they died that the tradition of the Jewish people would be eradicated from this world, we cry out, Shema Yisrael. For the holy martyrs that were slaughtered on the kibbutzes and at the dance festival. For the soldiers who were sent once again to defend the right of the Jewish people to live freely as Jewish in our ancient homeland. For all those who on October 7th heard the blood-curdling cries emanate from the south of Israel, we declare proudly and publicly, we have returned to our faith. We will not let you down. We will safeguard the ways of our Torah. We too will pass it on to the next generation. We have heard your call of Shema Yisrael. And our answer is, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. The Lord is our God. The Lord is one. Amen.